Sometimes the very thing you're praying for God to take away is the very thing he's using to save you. We don't like storms. We pray for sunshine, calm seas, clear sky. Come on, doesn't always hand us peaceful days. Sometimes the winds blow, the waves crash, and everything that once felt stable starts shaking. And in that moment, it's so easy to cry out, God, why are you letting this happen to me? But what if the storm you're in right now isn't meant to destroy you, but to deliver you? What if it's not punishment, protection? What if the chaos you're experiencing is actually keeping you from drifting towards something far worse? When a shepherd sees a sheep wandering toward the cliff, he doesn't sit back and let it go. He runs, he calls out, he corrects. Sometimes that correction feels like a storm to the sheep. It feels harsh, confusing, painful. But to the shepherd, it's mercy, because he knows if he doesn't intervene, that sheep will walk straight into its own destruction. In the same way, God allows certain storms not because he's angry, but because he loves you too much to let you stay where you are. Some storms are divine interventions in disguise. You may have been heading toward a relationship that would have broken you. You may have been chasing a dream that would have consumed you. You may have been depending on something that could never truly hold you. And God said, no, not this time. So he sent a storm to reroute your heart. Sometimes we don't see the hand of God until the storm clears. We don't recognize his mercy until we're standing on the other side, looking back and realizing, if that hadn't happened, I would have never changed. I would have never grown. I would have never found my true purpose. Every storm has a lesson. Some teach you patience, some teach you trust. Some strip away false security so that you can finally build your life on something unshakable. The winds may howl, but they also reveal what was never anchored properly. They show you what you've been leaning on that can't stand the pressure. There's a story of sailors who faced a violent storm at sea. They feared for their lives as the ship groaned and cracked. But when morning came, they discovered that the storm had pushed them away from a hidden reef that would have destroyed them completely. The same wind they cursed was the very wind that saved their lives. That's how God works sometimes. You think he's letting you break apart, but he's actually steering you to safety. The job you lost might be saving you from a future burnout. The rejection you faced might be saving you from a counterfeit opportunity. The delay you're frustrated by might be saving you from premature success that your character isn't ready to handle yet. When you're in the storm, you have two choices: panic or trust. Panic looks at the waves and cries, I'm doomed. Trust looks at the waves and whispers, if God brought me this far, he's not done with me yet. Storms don't last forever, but the faith built in them does. Don't misinterpret God's silence in the storm as absence. He's there, right in the middle of it, even when you can't see him. The same Jesus who calmed the sea also walked on it, meaning he's not intimidated by what's shaking you. He rules over it. You might not understand why it's happening now or how long it will last. But remember this, storms are temporary classrooms for eternal lessons. When the winds finally settle and the sky clears, you'll discover that you didn't just survive, you were saved. So instead of asking God to take away the storm, ask him to help you see what it's saving you from. Because sometimes the storm you're in is the greatest mercy you'll ever experience. The storm you're facing might be God's way of protecting you, not punishing you. It's easy to assume that when life falls apart, we must have done something wrong. Our minds rush to guilt, to shame, to self-blame. We say, maybe God's mad at me. Maybe I'm being punished. But what if that's not true at all? What if the storm that's surrounding you right now is actually the shelter that's saving you from something you can't yet see? We often look at life's disruptions as disasters, but in the eyes of God, they could be redirection. What feels like rejection may actually be protection. What feels like loss may actually be preservation. You might not understand the storm, but that doesn't mean God isn't in control of it. When God allows a storm, he's not trying to destroy you. He's trying to develop you. He sees the threats ahead that you cannot see. He knows the hearts of people around you that you cannot discern. He understands the weight of blessings that you're not ready to carry yet. So instead of giving you what you want, he allows a shaking to prepare you for what you need. Sometimes the storm is not punishment, it's preparation. It's God moving you out of the way of harm, even if it feels painful. Think about it. A loving parent doesn't let their child play near traffic, even if the child throws a tantrum. The parent knows the danger. The child only knows the desire. In the same way, God doesn't always give explanations when he redirects your life. He doesn't need your understanding to protect you. He just needs your trust. Sometimes the storm comes because you prayed for safety, and this is his answer. You asked him to guide you, to keep you, to make you stronger. But when his protection doesn't look like peace, we start to question his presence. We forget that protection doesn't always mean comfort. It means being kept from something worse. There are moments when you think everything's falling apart, but in reality, everything's falling into place. The job that ended, the relationship that broke, the plan that failed, all of it could be God saying, we're better off not knowing what this would have cost you. You see, storms have a way of clearing paths that comfort could never reveal. When everything is easy, we don't question much. We don't pause to ask where we're going. But when the winds rise and life shakes, that's when our hearts turn toward God with a deeper kind of dependence. The storm strips away the illusion of control. It reminds you that you were never steering the ship on your own. You might think God abandoned you, but he's closer than ever in the storm. He's not on the shore shouting directions. He's in the boat, weathering the waves with you. The same wind that scares you is the wind he's using to steer you toward safety. The storm doesn't mean he's distant. It means he's working. Sometimes he has to disturb your peace to protect your purpose. If he didn't allow the storm, you might stay in a place that would eventually break you. The very thing you see as punishment might be the wall he built to keep you from walking into danger. We often forget that God sees from a higher vantage point. What looks like chaos to you looks like orchestration to him. The storm is not random. It's not meaningless. It's not without purpose. It's the boundary line of his mercy. There are things he will not allow near you, people he will not let stay, doors he will not let open. Not because he doesn't love you, but because he does. You can't see it now, but he's saving you from things that could have wrecked your peace, your health, your calling. You might cry over what you lost, but one day you'll thank him for what he didn't let you keep. When the storm hits, you don't need to understand it. You need to stay anchored. You're in anchor. You need to remember that storms have an assignment. They test what's rooted and shake what's shallow. They remove what's temporary so that what's eternal can stand firm. You might lose people, possessions, or plans, but you'll gain perspective. You'll see that God's protection sometimes looks like pain, but it's pain with purpose. The storm you're facing could be keeping you from a trap disguised as a blessing. It could be delaying a path that would have destroyed your peace. It could be forcing you to depend on God in ways that comfort never could. Sometimes protection doesn't look like deliverance. It looks like discipline. God may be using the storm to shape your character, to strengthen your faith, to detach your heart from what was never meant to hold it. You may not like the process, but he's not trying to hurt you. He's trying to help you see what truly matters. If he didn't allow the storm, you would still be leaning on fragile things. You'd still be finding your worth in unstable places. The storm is breaking your dependence on what's weak so you can lean on what's unshakable. Even nature teaches us this truth. Trees that face strong winds grow deeper roots. Ships that endure rough seas are built stronger. Storms are not signs of weakness. They're environments that produce strength. You might be in the middle of something that feels like too much to bear. What if God's protection is wrapped in this very pressure? What if the storm you see as a threat is actually the force shaping you for your next season? Well, you may not see the full picture yet, but one day you'll look back and realize that the storm didn't take you out. It kept you from drifting away. Some storms are divine interventions meant to reroute your path toward purpose. There are moments in life when everything you planned suddenly collapses. and you find yourself wondering how it all went wrong. You had a direction, a dream, a vision that made perfect sense, and then out of nowhere, a storm came and pushed you off course. But what if you were never supposed to go the way you were headed? What if God allowed the winds to rise because you were drifting toward a destination that would have stolen your destiny? Destiny. We often assume storms are setbacks, but sometimes they are sacred redirections, sent to move us from where we are to where we're meant to be. There are seasons when God disrupts your comfort to rescue your calling. You might have settled into something that looked safe but was quietly suffocating your growth. You might have built your identity around a career, a relationship, or a plan that seemed right in your eyes but wasn't aligned with the greater purpose He designed for you. So, He sends a storm to shake you loose, not to destroy you, but to deliver you from staying stuck in something smaller than His vision for your life. The winds you resent might be the very winds that carry you into a new beginning. We see this pattern all throughout life and Scripture. People rarely discover their true calling in calm conditions. They find it in chaos, in loss, in moments when they have no choice but to let go of what's familiar. The storms expose where our trust has been misplaced. They tear down the illusion of control and force us to look upward. When everything that used to make sense no longer does, that's when your heart becomes teachable. That's when you're ready to hear direction from God instead of leaning on your own understanding. Sometimes we're so determined to get to our version of success that God has to interrupt our journey to save us from arriving at the wrong destination. You think you're on your way to something great, but He knows what's waiting at the end of that road. So He changes the weather. He sends a storm, not as a punishment, but as protection. You might lose your map, your confidence, your comfort, but you'll find your purpose. What you see as detour, He sees as direction. When Jonah ran from his calling, a storm met him at sea. The winds weren't sent to kill him, but to turn him around. That's what divine interventions do. They redirect us. That storm wasn't a sign of God's anger. It was an expression of His mercy. He loved Jonah too much to let him waste his life running from his assignment. And He loves you too much to let you miss yours. If He has to, He will rock the boat, change the plans, close the doors, and remove the people that are steering you away from what He's called you to do. The storm is not always the enemy. It's often the compass. There's something sacred about being lost in the middle of a storm. It strips you of certainty but gives you clarity. It reminds you that control was never the goal. Connection was. You were created to follow God's leading, not to script every detail of your life. The storm humbles the heart and awakens the spirit. It makes you realize that peace doesn't come from perfect conditions, but from perfect alignment with purpose. That's why sometimes you have to lose your plan to find His path. There are people who look back on the hardest seasons of their lives and realize that those storms were the very moments that pushed them into destiny. The job loss that forced them to start the business they were meant to build. The heartbreak that led them to discover their worth. The rejection that opened the door to something far greater. If they hadn't been interrupted, they would have settled. The storm broke what was temporary so that what was eternal could take root. Divine interventions rarely feel divine in the moment. They feel painful, confusing, and unfair. You don't see the rerouting. You only feel the resistance. You cry out, wondering why everything you built is falling apart, not realizing that it's falling into place. You can't see the masterpiece when you're standing in the middle of the mess. But what if the storm is God moving pieces behind the scenes, preparing the path that will lead you into purpose? What if this is not the end of something, but the beginning of everything you were born for? When life redirects you, it's not a failure. It's an adjustment. Pilots make constant course corrections in the sky. If they didn't, they would miss their destination by miles. In the same way, God allows storms to shift your direction before you drift too far. The turbulence doesn't mean you're lost, it means you're being guided. You may not see the coordinates changing, but you can trust that He does. Every gust, every wave, every pause has a reason. You're not being delayed, you're being aligned. Purpose rarely comes through peace first. It comes through pressure. The pressure exposes what doesn't belong, what can't continue, what's keeping you small. When the storm hits, things start breaking off, but maybe that's the point. Maybe what's being removed was never meant to carry you forward. Maybe the people walking away were never part of your next chapter. Maybe the plan that failed was protecting you from a future that couldn't hold you. Storms can be sacred because they strip away everything that distracts you from what's real. They make space for clarity, for courage, for calling. You don't always recognize it until much later, but the very moment you thought you were losing direction was when you were being set on the right one. The storm is God's way of saying, you've been heading toward good things, but I want to take you toward the best things. It's not random. It's not accidental. It's intentional, it's purposeful, and it's filled with love disguised as disruption. God uses turbulence to reveal what's weak and strengthen what's lasting. It's in the shaking that the truth of what you've built your life on is revealed. Calm seasons never test the foundation. Only storms do. When everything is peaceful, it's easy to believe you're strong, that your faith is deep, that your confidence is unshakable. But when the wind begins to howl and the ground starts to tremble, that's when you discover what's real and what was just routine. God doesn't send turbulence to torment you. He allows it to expose what needs strengthening and to solidify what's eternal. There are parts of your life that look stable until they're tested. You might think your relationships are strong, your faith is firm, your priorities are aligned. But when adversity comes, the truth surfaces. Turbulence has a way of revealing the cracks that comfort hides. It's not meant to shame you. It's meant to save you. God shakes what's temporary so that you can rebuild on what's permanent. He reveals what can't endure pressure so you'll stop trusting it to carry your destiny. When a plane faces turbulence, it's not because the pilot is unskilled or the route is wrong. It's because there are unseen forces in the atmosphere that have to be navigated. The turbulence doesn't change the destination. It just reminds you that the journey requires endurance. In the same way, God doesn't allow life's turbulence to change his promises. He allows it to remind you that promises require preparation. He lets the shaking come so you can strengthen your grip on what truly matters. Turbulence teaches you what can't fly with you into your future. Now, some attitudes, habits, and attachments are too fragile to survive the altitude God is calling you to. If he didn't allow turbulence, you'd carry dead weight into new levels of purpose. The shaking is his mercy because it causes you to let go of what would have held you back. You can't soar with God while holding on to what's shallow. Turbulence helps separate what's essential from what's expendable. We often want God to bring stability, but stability without strength becomes stagnation. You can't grow in still air. Growth happens when resistance meets movement. The turbulence in your life is the resistance training of your soul. It builds endurance, faith, and humility. It teaches you how to depend on God when you can't depend on anything else. It takes away your illusion of control and anchors you in surrender. You can't learn faith in theory. You learn it in turbulence. When everything is smooth, it's easy to drift into comfort and forget your dependence on God. But when turbulence hits, you start praying again. You start listening again. You start seeking again. The shaking brings you back into alignment with the source. It strips away the pride that says, I've got this, and replaces it with the humility that whispers, God, I need you. Turbulence doesn't ruin your faith. It refines it. It burns away self-reliance and reveals what's genuine. Sometimes God will let your plans shake so your priorities can settle. You might lose what's unstable, but you'll gain what's unshakable. When the storm hits, relationships that were built on convenience will fall apart, but relationships built on truth will endure. Faith that was built on feelings will falter, but faith built on conviction will stand. Dreams that were built on ego will crumble, but dreams rooted in purpose will remain. Turbulence has a way of revealing the difference between what's real and what's temporary. There's beauty in the breaking, because when things fall apart, you finally see what's been holding you together. God never exposes weakness to humiliate you. He does it to heal you. You can't strengthen what you refuse to face. So he allows the storm to bring to the surface what you've ignored in silence. The turbulence in your life might not be punishment. It might be the revelation you needed. You thought you were strong until the pressure came. But the pressure didn't come to crush you. It came to strengthen you. Even buildings must be tested against earthquakes to prove their strength. Engineers don't test them to destroy them. They test them to make them safer. In the same way, God doesn't allow shaking to destroy your structure. He allows it to prove your stability. What survives the storm becomes your new strength. The patience you develop in turbulence becomes endurance. The peace you learn in uncertainty becomes wisdom. The faith you find in fear becomes your anchor. Turbulence brings transformation. It shifts your focus from what's visible to what's invisible, from what's temporary to what's eternal. You begin to see that peace is not the absence of turbulence, it's the presence of trust. You start to realize that true strength isn't found in avoiding storms, but in standing through them. God doesn't remove every shaking because some shakings are sacred. They are the moments when the superficial gives way to the substantial, when your roots go deeper and your heart grows stronger. When turbulence comes, don't just ask for calm, ask for clarity. Ask God to show you what He's revealing through the shaking. Ask Him to help you see what needs to change, what needs to be released, what needs to be rebuilt. Needs to be rebuilt. Because if you let Him, the very turbulence that once terrified you will become the tool that transforms you. The shaking will show you what's strong enough to last. It will help you stop investing energy in what's fragile and start building your life on what's firm. You might not realize it now, but turbulence is often the proof that you're moving higher. Planes don't hit turbulence when they're grounded. They encounter it when they're climbing. The resistance you're feeling could be a sign that you're rising into new levels of growth, of faith, and maturity. It's not meant to stop you. It's meant to strengthen you for the altitude ahead. The shaking you fear might be the very thing that's preparing you to soar. Delays, losses, and disruptions often hide unseen blessings and protection. It's human nature to become frustrated when life doesn't move according to our plans. We live in a world that glorifies speed, progress, and constant results. So when God slows us down, it feels like we're being punished or forgotten. We start asking, why is this taking so long? Why did I lose this opportunity? Why did everything have to fall apart? But what if the things that look like setbacks are actually shields? What if the very moments that make you question God's timing are the ones where He's working most intentionally on your behalf? Sometimes He delays not to deny, but to deliver you safely into your destiny. When God delays something, it's rarely about withholding. It's about preparing. Preparation takes time because blessings have weight. And if you receive them too early, they can crush you instead of carrying you. That's why He lets you walk through waiting seasons. He's not just aligning circumstances, He's aligning your character. He's building patience, faith, and resilience inside you so that when the right moment comes, you'll be ready to handle it. You might see a delay as wasted time, but God sees it as sacred development. The space between promise and fulfillment is often where the most important transformation happens. Losses are another form of disguised mercy. When something or someone leaves your life, it's easy to feel empty and abandoned. But not everything you lose is meant to be replaced. Some things have to be removed to make room for something better. You might not understand it now, but every loss carries a hidden lesson. Every ending holds a seed of beginning. Sometimes God removes what you thought you needed because it was quietly limiting your growth. You were trying to build a future around something that couldn't sustain it. Oh, the loss hurts, but it's not a loss of love from God. It's a sign of His wisdom. Disruptions, too, have a divine purpose. They interrupt your comfort so you can encounter your calling. When your plans get interrupted, when things stop working the way they used to, when life takes an unexpected turn, it's often a signal that God is redirecting you. He's saying, you've stayed here long enough. It's time to move forward. Disruption can feel like chaos, but it's often the birthplace of clarity. You might have never discovered your purpose, your passion, or your next step if things had continued smoothly. Sometimes the only way God can get your attention is by shaking up your routine. There are blessings that only appear on the other side of brokenness. The delay teaches you trust, the loss teaches you surrender, and the disruption teaches you dependence. Each of these experiences shapes your spirit, making you stronger, wiser, and more discerning. You begin to realize that not everything good comes easy, and not everything hard is bad. The things that take the longest often carry the greatest depth. The things that break your heart often open your eyes. God's blessings are not always wrapped in comfort. Sometimes they come disguised as challenges. When you look back at your life, you'll notice that the things you once called disappointments were often divine appointments. The job that didn't work out made space for the opportunity that changed everything. The relationship that ended freed you to meet the person who truly valued you. The closed door that frustrated you was actually keeping you from walking into danger. God's hand was at work all along, even when you didn't recognize it. Every delay, every detour, every denial was protection in motion. There's a deep truth hidden in loss. God never subtracts without the intention to multiply. He takes away to make room for increase. But we often hold on to the temporary, afraid to let go of what's fading, not realizing that He's preparing something better. You can't receive what's next if your hands are still clinging to what's past. So sometimes He has to let things fall apart so that your heart can open up. The breaking becomes the birthing. The delay becomes the doorway. The loss becomes the lesson that prepares you for lasting peace. We must remember that time doesn't limit God. It trains us. What feels like delay is often divine timing unfolding with precision. If you could see what He sees, you'd understand why He's taking His time. He's coordinating details you don't even know exist yet. He's protecting you from battles you don't see coming. There are people and opportunities that aren't ready yet, and God, in His mercy, waits until everything aligns perfectly. So while you're anxious about what's taking so long, He's building something that will be worth the wait. Delays also test your faith. They reveal whether you trust God's heart when you can't trace His hand. Anyone can praise Him when things are quick and convenient, but real faith is forged in waiting rooms. It's in those moments when you have no control, when all you can do is believe that He hasn't forgotten you, that your faith grows roots. Waiting teaches you how to worship without evidence. It's the place where your confidence in God's character becomes unshakable. Losses and disruptions can also protect you from unseen harm. Sometimes you don't know what God saved you from until much later. The deal that fell through, the friend who betrayed you, the plan that collapsed, those could have been traps disguised as blessings. You think you're losing something valuable, but God knows it would have cost you more than you could handle. So He steps in and closes doors you are trying to force open. What feels like rejection is often redirection. What feels like an ending is often escape. There's a grace in life's interruption. The delay you despise may be the very thing keeping you safe. The loss you mourn may be the pruning that makes room for fruitfulness. The disruption you resist may be the push that leads you into destiny. You can't always see it in the moment because your view is limited by pain and impatience. But from God's perspective, it's all purpose. The delays are not wasted time. They are protected time. The losses are not punishments. They are pruning for growth. The disruptions are not accidents. They are divine adjustments preparing you for alignment with your highest calling. The storm you survive becomes the foundation of the faith you'll need next. Every trial you've endured, every dark night you've walked through, every season that almost broke you has been building something inside of you that you can't see yet. Faith isn't formed in comfort. It's forged in conflict. It's forged in conflict. The moments that test you the most are the moments that shape your spiritual strength. When you survive a storm, you don't come out the same. You come out stronger, wiser, and more grounded. You come out knowing that God was faithful when everything else failed. And that memory becomes the anchor for the next season of your life. The storms you go through are never wasted. God recycles pain. He takes what was meant to harm you and turns it into holy preparation. You might not realize it while you're still drenched and trembling from the wind, but later you'll see that every storm taught you something you couldn't have learned any other way. It taught you how to trust when you couldn't trace, how to praise when you couldn't predict, how to stand when you felt too weak to move. Every scar becomes a story, every tear becomes a testimony. What you thought would destroy you becomes the very evidence that you're still standing because grace carried you. Faith doesn't grow in sunshine. It grows when everything looks uncertain. When you've prayed and nothing changes. When you've waited and God seems silent. When the storm keeps raging and you're out of strength. That's when faith digs its roots deeper. It learns how to hold on when the feelings fade. The storm teaches you that faith isn't about seeing. It's about staying. Staying when it hurts. Staying when it's hard. Staying when you have no idea what God is doing, but you know who He is. That endurance becomes your foundation for the future. Every storm is a classroom for your soul. In one, you learn patience. In another, you learn resilience. In another, you learn that peace isn't the absence of problems, but the presence of trust. You can read about faith, talk about faith, and preach about faith, but until you've been in a storm, you don't really know faith. Because faith isn't theory, it's testimony. The faith you have today is built on the storms you survived yesterday. Each one left you with a new level of understanding of who God is and how deeply He cares for you. Sometimes when you're in the middle of a storm, you don't feel faith. You feel fear. But faith isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward anyway. You kept walking when the wind tried to knock you down. You kept believing when the outcome looked impossible. You kept trusting when all logic told you to quit. That's what makes faith powerful. Not that it feels strong, but that it chooses to stand even when it's shaking. The storms of life teach you that strength isn't about control. It's about surrender. You learn that the moment you let go of trying to fix everything, that's when God steps in and shows you He was holding it all. Oh. There's a certain confidence that comes from surviving what once terrified you. You start to realize, if I made it through that, I can make it through this. The storm you've already endured becomes proof that God won't fail you in the one you're facing now. You start to live with a quiet boldness, not because you're fearless, but because you've seen faithfulness. The pain that once felt unbearable becomes perspective. You begin to trust the process even when it's painful, because you've seen how purpose always rises out of pressure. The foundation of your faith isn't built in one moment. It's built brick by brick, storm by storm. Every time you thought you were breaking, you were actually building. God was laying a foundation so strong that the next storm wouldn't shake you the same way. You might bend, but you won't break. You might cry, but you won't collapse. You've learned that survival isn't weakness, it's strength refined by struggle. And now, when others face their storms, you'll be able to speak with authority born from experience. You won't just say, God can bring you through. You'll say, I know He will because I've seen Him do it. The storms also teach you humility. You learn that you're not the hero of your story, God is. You remember the nights you had no answers, no strength, no plan, and yet you woke up the next day still breathing, still standing, still hoping. You realized that it wasn't your power that carried you, it was grace. The awareness of that grace builds a deep gratitude that never fades. Even when new challenges come, you remember where you've been, and that memory steadies your heart. The same God who calmed yesterday's storm is still on board today. Sometimes the reason God doesn't calm every storm is because He wants to calm you first. He wants to show you that peace isn't found in the absence of trouble, but in His presence within it. And when you've been through enough storms, you start to live differently. You stop panicking when the sky turns dark. You stop doubting when the waves start rising. Because you know He's done it before, and He'll do it again. That's the unshakable confidence that only survivors carry. The storm becomes your story, and your story becomes someone else's strength. Faith built through storms becomes a foundation that can't be faked. It's not borrowed belief, it's proven truth. It's knowing, not just hoping that God is faithful. You've been through seasons where all you had was His Word, and that Word was enough. You've seen doors close that you begged Him to open, and later realized those closed doors were protection. You've seen prayers answered in ways you didn't expect, and that taught you to trust His plan even when you can't predict it. The storm you survived changes your posture. It makes you quieter but deeper. You don't need to prove as much or panic as fast. You've seen that storms pass, pain heals, and grace remains. You start to live with steady assurance instead of fragile optimism. That's what storms do. They turn fragile faith into firm faith. The waves that once threatened to drown you now remind you that you can walk on water if your eyes stay fixed on God. The strength you have today is the result of the storms you've survived before. And that strength becomes the foundation that will carry you into everything God has prepared next.